Prime Minister Mark Carney's list of nation-building projects has been released. It includes a liquefied natural gas or LNG expansion project, and here on the East Coast, a major wind energy project.
They recognize that Nova Scotia can contribute to the goal of making Canada an energy superpower with our wind project. The offshore wind potential we have is so incredible.
It was announced as a nation-building moment. Prime Minister Mark Carney placed the Wind West offshore wind project on Canada's list of projects of national interest, and Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston called it a big day for the province and for the country. The scale is unlike anything Canada has attempted in clean energy before. The first phase alone is planned at 5,000 megawatts, generating about 24 terawatt-hours of electricity each year. The full offshore potential is far greater, reaching 40 to 60 gigawatts, while Nova Scotia itself only consumes 2 to 3. That means the province is looking at a resource that could power multiple provinces or entire regions of the United States. At its core, Wind West is not just another renewable project. It is being sold as a pillar of Canada's ambition to become an energy superpower. For Nova Scotia, it is the chance to anchor new industries, from ports to manufacturing, while showing that the Atlantic coast can deliver the same scale of energy development long associated with Western oil and gas. Domestically, the benefits are clear. The project is expected to attract tens of billions of Canadian dollars in private investment and create thousands of jobs during construction and operation. From engineers to tradespeople, the opportunities cut across the economy. Nova Scotia's offshore wind speeds are about 10% stronger than those in the North Sea, giving the province a natural advantage. Harnessing this potential strengthens Canada's energy security and builds the foundation for new exports, from electricity to green hydrogen. Most importantly, production will far exceed local demand, ensuring that surplus energy becomes an instrument of national leverage.
Produce over 40, 50, 60 gigawatts of clean green energy offshore in Nova Scotia, and we only use 2 to 3. So when you produce that much, you need to have a market for the rest. So that means, you need to be able to transmit it and sell it to other markets, maybe in Quebec or Ontario or beyond.
Nova Scotia consumes only a fraction of the energy Wind West could deliver. Even after domestic needs are met, more than 90% of the output could be directed outward. Transmission is already part of the plan. The New England Clean Energy Connect line, a 1,200-megawatt high-voltage link from Quebec to Maine, is expected to enter service by late 2025. New Brunswick and Nova Scotia utilities are also preparing a new 345-kilovolt connection to move power south. The United States is the natural buyer. ISO New England data shows the region has been a net importer of electricity for years, with flows from Quebec and New Brunswick providing a buffer when local plants shut down or when natural gas prices spike. Coal units are being retired, gas remains volatile, and demand for low-carbon supply is rising. In this environment, offshore wind from Atlantic Canada is not a luxury. It is a direct complement to hydro imports from Quebec, filling gaps and providing stability to a system that cannot generate enough power within its own borders. This is where U.S. politics collide with energy reality. President Donald Trump has imposed global tariffs between 10 and 50% and threatened a 100% tariff on imported semiconductors. Canada has been a central target, facing high duties on steel, aluminum, and softwood lumber. Yet the same United States that pressures Canada on trade is also short of power. Dominion Energy projects that regional electricity demand could double within 15 years, driven by artificial intelligence and data centers. Wholesale prices in New England are already climbing as supply struggles to keep pace. That is why Canadian electricity is not optional. It is the stabilizer that keeps American grids reliable. Wind West will expand that role. Canada is positioned to deliver the clean power the U.S. economy requires at the very moment when tariffs are supposed to reduce Canadian influence. Policies designed to pressure Canada may backfire, because Washington cannot easily replace the energy lifeline that flows across the border. For Canada, Wind West is both a domestic achievement and an international bargaining chip. For the United States, it is a reminder that trade disputes cannot erase geography or the physics of energy supply. In the years ahead, the turbines rising off Nova Scotia's coast may prove to be more than just a symbol of green ambition. They may be the reason America cannot fully escape its dependence on Canadian energy.
Canada is home to some of the largest reserves of critical minerals in the world. We have lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, and rare earth elements. They're all widely available here. How Canada can become more self-sufficient in the face of an ongoing trade war with the U.S.
Nickel rarely makes headlines, yet it sits at the heart of stainless steel and many electric vehicle batteries. In 2025, as global tariffs reshaped supply chains, the metal became more than a commodity. It became leverage. Under the policies described in your provided context, the United States imposed broad tariffs in August, with rates that reached well beyond earlier baselines. Canada adjusted on multiple fronts, but one strategic question remains. If talks stall and pressure rises, could nickel become the tool Canada uses to protect its own economy while signaling strength at the negotiating table? That is the thread we follow today, and it begins with understanding Canada's real weight in this market. Canada increased nickel output from about 159,000 tons in 2023 to roughly 190,000 tons in 2024, according to figures captured in the context you provided from Natural Resources Canada and USGS. On the trade side, Canada exported about 99.6 thousand tons of primary nickel products in 2023, worth roughly 3.2 billion Canadian dollars, and the United States purchased nearly half of that volume. USGS data summarized in your context adds an important layer for the U.S. market. Across 2020 through 2023, roughly 46% of U.S. primary nickel imports came from Canada, while U.S. apparent consumption ran near 84,000 tons per year. Domestic U.S. mining exists, but it is limited in scale compared with demand. This pattern makes Canada a nearby, reliable supplier, and it places nickel alongside oil, gas, and potash as one of Canada's quiet sources of bargaining power. Leverage only matters if substitution is hard and time is short. For the United States, replacing a large share of Canadian nickel quickly would be difficult. Based on the consumption baseline of about 84,000 tons and the import share figures noted above, a sharp Canadian restriction could create an effective shortfall on the order of 30 to 40,000 tons over a full year, even after tapping alternate suppliers and scrap. The cost impact can be sketched with a transparent back-of-the-envelope method. Using the average 2024 London Metal Exchange nickel price level referenced in your context, around $17,000 per ton, total annual primary nickel expenditures would be near $1.43 billion. A supply squeeze that lifts effective prices by 20 to 30% would add roughly $290 to $430 million in direct nickel costs over a year. This is not a forecast, it is a scenario built from the numbers in the materials you provided, but it illustrates why nickel gets policymakers' attention. The first impact would show up where nickel is used most. USGS end-use shares in your context indicate that the majority of nickel demand goes into stainless steel and high-performance alloys. Those inputs feed equipment makers, industrial hardware, and consumer appliances. Margins would compress until producers could pass costs through. The second impact would touch electric vehicle supply chains that use nickel-rich chemistries. Even with the rise of lower-cost LFP batteries, many platforms still rely on nickel for higher energy density. A sustained bump in nickel costs would slow planned price reductions for some models and could delay investment decisions at the margin. None of this requires a full export ban. A partial restriction, a new export condition, or tighter logistics would likely be enough to move prices and focus minds in Washington. For Canada, the trade-off is real because the U.S. is a large and convenient buyer. For the United States, the risk is also real because Canadian nickel is not easily replaced on short notice. In a trade war defined by tariffs, this is one pressure point that both sides understand, and it explains why nickel is now part of the strategic conversation.
So today, as you know, Canada's new government is announcing the first set of projects that we believe are both in Canada's national interest and are feasible to be built.
For months, the spotlight has been fixed on tariffs, LNG exports, and the idea of Canada turning itself into an energy superpower. But energy is only one part of the story. The real contest of the 21st century is not just about oil or gas. It is about the minerals that sit beneath the ground and power the technologies of the future.
Construction on the McIlvenna Bay mine near Cretan is over halfway complete. And when it's finished, 5,000 tons of zinc, copper, gold, and silver can be pulled from the ground every day. Now, it's part of 5 nation building projects Prime Minister Mark Carney wants approved.
Copper, nickel, and cobalt are the backbone of electric vehicles, batteries, artificial intelligence, and advanced chips. Whoever controls the supply of these materials controls the pace and price of global industry. Canada's leadership knows this, and that is why the new list of nation-building projects points to something larger. Canada is no longer content to be known simply as an LNG hub. It is positioning itself as a strategic source of critical minerals, a role that could redefine its place in the world economy. The first wave of projects includes 2 mines that could immediately reshape Canada's mineral map. In Saskatchewan, the McIlvenna Bay project is designed to be the country's first net-zero copper mine. It will feed not only domestic industries, but also smelting operations in Quebec, ensuring that the value chain stays within Canadian borders. In British Columbia, the Red Chris copper and gold expansion promises to boost national copper production by more than 15%. It will operate with sharply lower emissions and in partnership with the Tahltan Nation, embedding reconciliation into economic development. Beyond these, the government has its eyes on longer-term opportunities. Ontario's Ring of Fire region contains some of the largest untapped deposits of nickel and chromite, key ingredients for electric vehicle batteries and stainless steel. In Quebec and Labrador, the Labrador Trough offers vast reserves of iron ore and other minerals that can anchor the next generation of clean steel and energy storage. Together, these projects outline a complete vision, not just digging resources out of the ground, but creating a mine-to-market supply chain that links Canadian miners, refiners, ports, and trading partners. The importance of this shift is best understood in the context of global competition. The United States, even as it imposes tariffs on Canadian metals, remains heavily dependent on foreign supplies of critical minerals. China, meanwhile, dominates refining and processing capacity worldwide, turning raw ore into finished inputs for batteries and electronics. Canada's push is aimed at breaking this imbalance. By developing its own processing facilities and building secure corridors from northern mines to coastal ports, Canada can present itself as a clean and reliable alternative. This is more than economics, it is leverage. If Canada succeeds, every electric vehicle built in North America, every data center powered by advanced batteries, and every chip that requires rare metals will be linked back to Canadian supply. Europe, too, is looking for dependable partners to reduce its reliance on China. Ottawa sees the opening and is moving quickly. In this sense, the critical minerals strategy is a quiet counterpunch. While Washington's tariffs sought to box Canada in, they are instead pushing Ottawa to expand its reach and make itself indispensable in the industries that matter most for the future. Challenges remain. Mining is expensive. Northern infrastructure is thin, and environmental and indigenous partnerships must be carefully managed. Yet the new Major Projects Office promises faster decisions, giving Canada a chance to move sooner than in the past. If projects like McIlvenna Bay, Red Chris, and the Ring of Fire advance on time, Canada will move from being seen as an energy supplier to becoming a strategic hub for minerals the world cannot do without. In that world, tariffs lose their edge, and Canada gains lasting leverage.
Look at the Canada-US relationship under President Trump is obviously one that's been strained.
On his European tour, the Prime Minister offers a preview of major spending to come with an eye to opening up new markets.
When Donald Trump raised tariffs on Canadian goods outside of CSUMA to 35%, it looked like a punishing blow. Lumber, Steel, aluminum, and manufactured products were all hit with costs that threatened jobs and strained supply chains. Many sectors in Canada felt the shock immediately. Yet one sector stood apart: energy, from oil and gas to electricity. Uranium and the emerging promise of liquefied natural gas remained largely untouched. This reality has become Canada's shield in the middle of Trump's trade war. And it is not just protection, it is the foundation for a counter-strategy that shows Canada is not simply enduring American pressure, but preparing to turn it into leverage.
Our government is in the process of unleashing $500 billion of investment in energy infrastructure, port infrastructure.
Canada is the largest energy supplier to the United States. In 2024, according to Natural Resources Canada, exports included nearly 4 million barrels of crude oil per day, about 8.5 billion cubic feet of natural gas each day, and more than 11 terawatt-hours of electricity over the year. Canada also provided 27% of U.S. uranium imports, the single largest source. These flows are not optional. They are part of the backbone of the U.S. economy and critical to industries that cannot operate without them. Trump can raise tariffs on Canadian metals or manufactured goods, but shutting off oil from Alberta or uranium from Saskatchewan would risk blackouts, fuel shortages, and national security concerns in the United States. This dependency is structural. It gives Ottawa quiet but powerful leverage because Trump's tariff weapons lose their bite when applied to resources America cannot replace. That leverage is rarely shouted about in Ottawa, yet it is always present in the background of negotiations in Washington.
Expansions of the Port of Montreal, its operators say, would bring in $140 million per year, and of northern Manitoba's Port of Churchill to get liquefied natural gas to overseas markets.
Beyond oil, gas, and uranium, Canada is moving to add another card to its hand. Liquefied natural gas was once dismissed. Only 3 years ago, Justin Trudeau said there was no business case to ship Canadian LNG across the Atlantic. That position has now been abandoned. Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced plans for $500 billion in energy and port infrastructure investments. Central to this package are expansions at the Port of Montreal and the Port of Churchill in northern Manitoba. Montreal already handles critical mineral shipments and could generate $140 million per year once expanded. Churchill, sitting on Hudson Bay, is being positioned as a gateway for LNG to overseas markets. The logic is clear. Europe is desperate to reduce its reliance on Russian gas. Canada, with vast reserves and political stability, is well placed to supply part of that demand. Carney has said his phone blew up with interest from investors as soon as the plan was signaled. Businesses read it as a policy shift with teeth. The creation of a major projects office by Labor Day is intended to fast-track approvals and coordinate environmental reviews with provinces and territories. For Canada, LNG is no longer an afterthought. It is an arsenal being built in direct response to the pressure created by Trump's tariffs. Trump believes tariffs can bend allies to his will. For Canada, those tariffs have been painful in certain sectors. But they have also forced a national reckoning. By doubling down on energy and by opening new channels for LNG exports, Ottawa is reducing its exposure to the U.S. market while strengthening ties with Europe. Oil, gas, uranium, electricity, and now LNG together form a foundation of leverage that no tariff can erase. Trump may be writing the rules of the tariff war, but Canada is writing a new playbook in energy. What began as a shield against American pressure is now becoming a weapon of strategy. Far from being cornered, Canada is showing it can turn a storm of tariffs into an opportunity to redefine its role on the global stage.
Actually, what Mark Carney said last week was true. He said we face the lowest effective tariff of any country. So if we can just keep it that way until we renegotiate CUSMA, I think we'll be in good shape. The key thing, and this is critical for Quebec, is to get those aluminum tariffs reduced or eliminated entirely.
When Trump's tariffs struck Canadian steel and aluminum, the shock reverberated through North America's industrial core. These metals are not marginal products. They are the foundation of Canada's modern economy, supporting auto plants in Ontario, aerospace manufacturers in Quebec, and construction projects nationwide. According to statistics, Canada exports of steel and aluminum together are valued in the tens of billions annually, directly tied to hundreds of thousands of jobs. In August, Ottawa confirmed that U.S. duties on these products remained at some of the highest levels, ranging from 35% to 50%. For Hamilton, Sault Ste. Marie, and Saguenay, those numbers represent far more than trade policy. They represent the survival of local economies built around mills and smelters that have anchored communities for generations. In response, Carney's government avoided escalating across the board. Retaliatory tariffs on most U.S. goods were lifted to keep the dialogue open, but countermeasures on steel and aluminum stayed firmly in place. Alongside that, Industry Minister Melanie Joly announced a $1 billion support package in July designed to sustain operations, safeguard jobs, and help companies weather the uncertainty. This mix of selective defense and domestic reinforcement sent two messages. To Washington, it showed that Canada would not yield on core industries. To Canadian workers, it demonstrated that the government was prepared to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. The move also helped reassure provincial leaders in Ontario and Quebec that Ottawa was not abandoning industrial communities at the front line of the tariff battle. By investing heavily in workers, Canada demonstrated that its strategy is not just reactive, it is proactive, setting the stage for resilience in future disputes as well.
So I think there is reason to be optimistic. Canada accounts for about 70% of U.S. aluminum imports. The United States doesn't make a lot of aluminum. And so I think we could probably get those tariffs reduced.
What makes Canada's position stronger than it may appear is the underlying structure of the market. U.S. trade data shows that roughly 70% of aluminum imported into America comes from Canada, while Canadian steel remains deeply embedded in auto supply chains across the Great Lakes. These are not easy flows to replace. U.S. smelters have struggled for years due to high electricity costs, while Quebec enjoys abundant hydroelectricity that allows its aluminum industry to remain globally competitive. In steel, Canadian inputs are vital to automakers in Detroit and suppliers in Ohio. Tariffs may create headlines, but they also raise costs for American producers and consumers. In practice, the U.S. needs Canadian metals just as much as Canada needs access to the U.S. market. That mutual dependence gives Ottawa leverage every time Trump threatens new measures. It is a reminder that geography and integration, not political slogans, define the real balance of power in North America's industrial system. The clash over steel and aluminum illustrates how Canada is adapting to an era of constant tariff threats. Trump has made himself the central figure in this drama, but Canada has refused to play the role of a passive target. By holding firm on core industries, delivering direct support to workers, and keeping channels of negotiation open, Ottawa has created a balanced strategy that combines toughness with pragmatism. As the 2026 USMCA review approaches, the resilience of steel and aluminum will be a benchmark for how well Canada has managed its relationship with Washington. Trump may rely on tariffs to project power, but Canada has shown that endurance, resource advantages, and careful strategy can be just as powerful. This is not a story of capitulation. It is the story of a country proving that it can defend its backbone industries and remain an indispensable partner in North America's economic future.